In those days, the task of building a fiberglass boat started with the drawing of the lines, full size, on the loft floor. Using these lines, frames are cut and assembled on a jig. The accuracy of the jig and the frames is paramount. The wooden structures such as hull, deck and flybridge over which the molds are made are referred to as plugs. Once the frames are assembled on the jig, we get our first hint at the shape of the boat. It is also the signal for a celebration, which for a traditional wooden boat would be the equivalent to the laying of the keel. In Chinese tradition, this means the lighting of joss sticks and offerings to the deities. It also involves the hammering in of a symbolic nail, here by the yard manager John Sun, and here by myself and Frank Ling, representing the owner of the yard. This is a group photo of all those involved in the project. To my left is Lao Gao, master carpenter. This is my small windowless office where all the design work is done. The date on the calendar is November the 27th, 1985. There is less risk in building the deck plug atop the first hull, as it guarantees the two parts will be a perfect fit. But making the two molds simultaneously, as shown here, shortens the construction process by 2 months. The hull plug is now sheathed in plywood, giving an even better view of its shape. Note the depth of the keel integral with the hull. As the deck progresses, ideas are formulated for the anchor platform. The hull plug is covered with fiberglass to ensure its stability and provide a base for layers of fairing putty, which is sanded using longboards. The deck plug progresses under the watchful eye of Lao Gao. With the fairing complete, the dummy planking lines are carefully marked on the hull using chalk snap lines. The lines are then routed into the surface of the plug using a wood batten as a guide. The deck plug is making good progress. The proposed window locations are marked. The base for the radar arch is figured out with an angle of 116.5 degrees. Work has also started on the flybridge plug, built atop the deck plug. This will be the control console, developed from concept sketches like this one. The ideas for the anchor platform have been translated into three-dimensional form. Skylights are checked for size on the foredeck. With construction complete, the surface of the plug is covered in fairing putty, which is sanded to a fine finish. This is followed by a coating of blue gel coat. Note the degree of detail on the flybridge. Here the non-skid pattern is being detailed. The plug surface is sanded and polished to a mirror finish. same process is applied to the hull. The finish must be flawless. Every blemish, however minor, will be faithfully duplicated in the mould, and thence to every hull made from that mould. When complete, the plug receives several coats of wax, and black tooling gel coat is then sprayed. This will become the working surface of the mould and is a critical step. When the gel coat is cured, each of the dummy planking grooves must be hand detailed with strips of surfacing mat to eliminate air bubbles. The mould structure is then built up with many layers of fiberglass. With lamination complete, the mould is reinforced and a complex steel support structure added. It is placed on dollies and moved outside, where two cranes are used in unison to turn it right side up. The mould has been constructed in two halves to allow removal from the mould of the completed hull, which would otherwise be locked in place by the planking grooves. Removing the first half is much easier than the second, but eventually that too is broken free. With the hull plug right side up and hanging free, we can now gain an even better idea of the shape of the hull. However, this is but a fleeting glimpse, because having served its purpose, the plug, on which so much time and labor has been lavished, is discarded. I am often asked why this cannot be saved and made into a boat. The reason is, the plug would need to be constructed to a much higher standard, using better and more costly materials. Having reached this stage, we are within 2 weeks of building our first fiberglass hull. The two halves of the mould are moved to the lamination shop. Here they are mated together, waxed and sprayed with white gel coat to create the first hull. In effect, we apply the paint and then build the hull inside it, the opposite of what normally happens. The white gel coat is backed with black to reduce light transmission and make it easier to spot air bubbles during lamination. Meanwhile, mould construction is underway on the deck. Before it too is removed and turned over on a rainy day. The flybridge plug follows the same procedure. This is a very complex and fragile structure. With hull lamination complete, work can now start on laying out the hull stringers and bulkheads. We have finally made a start on building hull number 1. Although the deck plug was built in one piece, the moulds are in 2 sections. Here, work is proceeding on the main section. Draw plugs for each window and door opening have been pre-made and are installed so that the openings will be moulded rather than cut, saving material and making the openings stronger. Every mould has to be polished and meticulously waxed before being used to make boat parts. Here a carpenter is attaching draw plugs for lazarette hatch openings. The main bulkhead and stringers are now installed in the hull. Hull number 1 is moved from the mould shop to the assembly area, representing another major milestone. The surface finish is much better than indicated by these old photos. The yard has invested in a massive new building specifically for the Fleming project. The first forward deck part is removed from the mould under the framework of the new building. The fine detail of the anchor platform can now be seen. The forward deck with its fragile sides is carefully lowered into position. Inside the hull, work is moving ahead with hull reinforcement and engine alignment, using a simple plywood template. Here a carpenter is creating a template for a fuel tank. Forward of the main bulkhead, stringers are prepared for the accommodation area. The black water tanks can be seen between the center stringers. With the shaft line established, patterns are made for casting the bronze struts. Lamination on the main deck proceeds. The draw plugs can be clearly seen. With the mould removed, the plug for the flying bridge is used to figure out the shape of the radar arch. The first of 4 fuel tanks. Later boats used tanks made of fiberglass. In the background are parts for the engine exhaust system. The yard has a well-equipped machine shop and metalworking facilities. The first main deck part is removed from its mould. The plywood draw plugs will be knocked out and returned to the mould, ready for the next part. The deck plugs are discarded. The full lattice of reinforcing frames and stringers have been completed in the hull. After painting, the engine room is ready to receive engines and tanks. The main deck can now be installed, and here we arrive at the moment of truth. Will the hull fit the deck? A modest amount of trimming is required, and the answer is yes. A huge sigh of relief. The first flying bridge part has been sprayed with gel coat and is soon ready for removal. Here you can see the fine detail of the non-skid, molded in a contrasting color. It is time to install the last major part and check that it too will fit. Yes, and now we have a further opportunity of how the completed boat will look. With all major components in place, we now concentrate on the daunting task of creating comfortable and attractive staterooms from this unpromising mess. Battens are used to test ideas. This is the pilot house before the control console is built. Work also proceeds on the exterior. The priority for the location of the port lights is dictated by the exterior of the boat. Even such details as the steering wheel need to be figured out. A special shaft drive isolates the propeller thrust from the transmission, allowing the use of softer engine mounts. Hull number 2 now joins hull number 1 in the new building. The forward stateroom is beginning to take shape. Hull number 3 is in the foreground. Ideally, it would be best to complete the first boat before starting subsequent hulls, but given the high cost of tooling, economic factors rarely allow this luxury. The plug for the radar arch is in place for a test fit before making the mould. A total of 55 moulds are needed to build this boat. The boot stripe is sprayed on hull number 1. The deck is lowered onto hull number 2, following the installation of engines and tanks. Hull number 3 is making good progress. Finally, the great day arrives, and hull number 1 is moved out of the building, and after 14 months of work, we get our first look at an almost completed boat. There still remains much work testing all the systems and attending to a myriad of details. A surprisingly small truck arrives to take our brainchild on the first leg of her long journey. It is an anxious moment as she leaves the place of her birth. Firecrackers are lit as she exits the gate. Her route to Kaohsiung Harbor takes her through small villages where power lines are raised with wooden poles. She is too large to pass through the toll station, so concrete blocks need to be moved by hand. She clears an overpass by just 3 inches, and then only because the boat has been loaded down by the bow. At last we arrive at the docks. With heart in mouth, we watch the product of a year's hard work leave the land of Taiwan. Emotions are mixed. Our hopes for the future hang in the balance as the first Fleming is loaded aboard the ship. A ship that will carry her across the wide Pacific to her destination in distant California. We watch the offload in LA with the knowledge that she has never been in the water. It is a stressful moment for all of us responsible for her design and construction. All goes well, and a few days later she is officially christened with a bottle of champagne broken on the bow roller. Here she is underway at the entrance to Newport Beach Harbor, and here during sea trials off the coast of California. We conclude this video with this shot of the same hull number 1 underway during a Fleming Owners Rendezvous in Anacortes in April 2016, 30 years after the events in this video.